Hello and welcome back for another episode of the season of Try This on Wisp Sports. I'm your host, Dr. Kirstin Lauritzen, and we have a very special episode for you. This is actually going to be the last episode of 2021, and we will pick up again in January of 2022. But today I have a guest with me that I'm so excited to have with us. Her name is Mckenna Miler. She went viral after running a 525-mile marathon, or just a 525 mile, 9 months pregnant. And then shortly thereafter, she qualified for the 10K in the Olympic trials with a time of 32:03, where she placed 14th, which is awesome. This led to signing with A6 Shoe Company and UCAN Nutrition. In her half marathon debut, she won and set the Desert News course record in 1:09:54. She then ran the New York Marathon 1 year postpartum, which I can't wait to talk more about. And she is continuing to learn and grow in the sport as well as in life. Mckenna, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to talk.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I wanted to start off with just asking you some more questions, like what's your background? What was your journey to becoming a pro athlete, and what brought you into running?
Yeah. So it's so funny with that viral mile that happened when I was pregnant. Some people just assumed that was my first mile ever, or that was my first time running 525. But I actually have been running since, freshman year of high school, when my cross country coach recruited me from the soccer team. And ever since then, I ran at a D1 school in college for Brigham Young University. And then I was just kind of running still competitively, not quite at the level I was at postpartum, but I was, running for a club called Valor Track Club in Southern California. And that's where I grew up. And the viral mile happened, 5 years post-college. So I'd really been running for quite a long time. I think that's maybe 15 plus years, I guess, since freshman year of high school. And that's kind of been my background so far with running.
That's really amazing. Did you have any goals when you started out, with cross country that, you played soccer before that, but did you have any goals of staying kind of in the athletic world when you grew up, I suppose?
Yeah, I guess I didn't, because it's so funny. Post-college, I felt like every year was this will probably be my last year running competitively and putting this amount of hours into the sport. And every year it kind of just kept rolling around again. And I was like, well, why not continue on? And it still seemed exciting, and I was still meeting a lot of fun people. And so I continued at it.
That's amazing. I feel like, did you have something else that you wanted to do when you thought running would be over? Oh yeah. So, I always wanted to go to the Olympic trials for track. Okay. I thought that would be such a cool goal. But I just didn't know if that was really in my wheelhouse. It didn't seem like I was really having that level of success with running. But so I decided, if I wasn't going to be running, I could delve into all these other sports that I dabbled in. My family really likes to skate and surf, and they play a lot of volleyball, which I'm not spectacular at by any means. But just to be able to spend more time doing things recreationally, I thought that's kind of what would happen with my life. Maybe even rock climbing. Have you tried that? Yeah. Yes. I'm not a fan.
No.
I'm not a huge fan of heights, so it takes a lot for me to rock climb. Even I think the harder one is when bouldering, right? So you're not attached to a rope or any type of gear. That one it's hard for me. Just I don't like that feeling of if I don't get this next move, I'm literally falling on my back, and I don't like that feeling.
Yeah. Well, that's so funny. That's what I loved. I love that.
Yeah, totally. So what led you to, so you did the Olympic, well, there's so many different areas I want to go with this, but first off, so you qualified for the Olympic trials, and then what led you into that half marathon? How did you kind of get into these sort of longer distance type races?
So yeah, that's a good question. I handle a lot of high mileage pretty well. I've put a lot into weightlifting and strength training, especially when I wasn't, excelling at the level I'm currently at right now. I was putting a lot into strength training just because I had so much fun being able to lift heavy, and I just felt like it was really helping me keep like an injury-free running career. And so as the years progressed, I never really got injured, and I was really able to set some consistent high mileage. And so the people I'd surrounded myself with, like coaches and my agent, they all thought, like, you're going to be really good, like at the marathon because like you can handle that volume. And so that's kind of what like pushed me towards there. I mean, I've always been intrigued. Anytime you haven't done something, you kind of want to see what you can do. And then once you've done it, you want to see how you can improve. Right.
Oh, yes.
So I mean, like it wasn't my first time like running a half marathon. But that was really my first time, like, competitively specifically focusing on the half marathon and not using it as like a training race totally. and making it more of a race, which was really fun to really like hammer it out. But yeah, before then I was really into track and running 5Ks and 10Ks, and I still am. I really have a lot of fun with like that precision, and the atmosphere in track is really fun.
Yeah. So, okay. I was curious because strength training is such a hard thing, I think, for a lot of endurance athletes in general. I feel like it's becoming a little bit more popular now, but for a really, really long time, and maybe still getting endurance athletes in that like realm to strength train is difficult. By strength training, what did you mean by that? Like, what were some of the movements? What are some of the things that you would do in strength training? Just so that people can kind of get an idea of what you're thinking about. Cause there's so many different ways we can do strength training, right? Like heavy weights, band resistance, stuff like that.
So what I had seen with myself, was that, like heavy lifting. So basically anything where you're doing like 10 reps or less. And honestly, I feel like I was working like 4 to 7 rep range of lifting heavy. So like once you start lifting past that, your form kind of starts to break down. So, and so I was doing like a lot of deadlifts and squatting. And honestly, I think I was overdoing it in the weight room. Like I really was like doing actual sessions of like heavy lifting and, kind of trying to just do everything that I possibly could. And I think that was bleeding into my workouts, which I totally get from like a running perspective that you're like, no, that like this weightlifting is taking away from my running. But I do think that if you are able to scale it down to like the essentials and really like, maybe do like a 20-minute like lifting session instead of like a solid like 45. If you're doing like three days a week of like 20 minutes of, you pick like 2 really heavy exercises, I think that goes a long way, especially with like reinforcing your bone density. And then, just like your risk of getting injured. I also did work a lot on balance work. So pretty much like any like one-legged or like one-legged RDLs, one-legged squats, one-legged like lunges, and anything like with your rotational abs. I think that's like really important for injury prevention and having a strong back. So those are always kind of been my focuses, I guess. That's what I mean by strength
I
training.
love that. Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, I think the thing that people don't really realize, especially with me, is that it's very one-legged. You're doing a lot. You're doing a lot on one leg. And so then people get really confused when things like their glutes, especially on the outside, start to really hurt by, mile 20. And it's because your glutes are literally doing one side at a time, trying to keep your hips as level as they possibly can. So working that is really critical. Thank you for sharing. That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's a different perspective usually than you normally get. So I appreciate that.
Well, and I do want to say it really is so funny, like, cause I've totally been a part of the debate of like whether distance runners should be lifting heavy or not. And like, I've kind of just seen both sides of it. And I actually haven't, since I've had my baby in this like last year, I just had not been prioritizing strength training. And this is the first year I got injured, like ever in my whole career. I was like, you have got to be kidding me. And so I would say like prioritizing like consistency is really important. And I also like, I really didn't get injured till like this was, I'm like currently like this will be my first week back running. So it was right before the marathon that like my Achilles started flaring up. But what I'm saying is like, it wasn't because of like postpartum stuff. Like I was fully handling high mileage fine. And honestly, I've talked to my husband about like how I think that the years of strength training that I did led into this year and helped out a lot. But like it was finally like catching up to me that I wasn't like prioritizing it because I just haven't really had time with a baby.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I completely understand, but I love that perspective though, because I think that's really where a lot of people end up is they don't prioritize strength training, no matter where you are, right, in that cycle. And that's just one of the things that can lead to injuries for sure. So you just ran the New York City Marathon. How did that go? Any fun like stories or learning things?
Oh my God. Well, okay. We absolutely loved our experience. If you have the opportunity to run the New York Marathon, you like the energy on the streets is just absolutely incredible. Like 26.2 miles is a really long way to go and to have like people just constantly on the streets. And like, I think the only silent parts are really on the bridges where people can't go. And like, there's just so much energy. It's super cool. But you know what? I like did not have a good experience racing wise. I was really happy with where my training was at and like how I set myself up in going into the race. But I kind of had a little problem with the nutrition bottles, which was just really unfortunate. I feel like I did everything within my control. I thought I would. So what happened was I like grabbed my first bottle and I started drinking from the bottle. And I was like, oh man, maybe I should have practiced this more. Like I'm not getting very much out of the bottle. And so I was like, it's okay. Like I'll just get more out of the next one. And so I like, grab my next one and I hear this like chunk kind of like hit the top of the nozzle. And I realized my nutrition had, it was too thick to get through the nozzle.
Oh no.
So I was like getting a little bit out. And I think in my mind, I was kind of just like rationalizing that like, I'm getting enough to hold me over. Like I'll be okay to, continue on. That was kind of stupid. And I should have, taken Gatorade from the course or something. Sure. I missed my next bottle and then it was just like you dig yourself in a hole if you don't get it at the right time, which is like towards the beginning of the race. And so by the time I hit 20 miles, I was bonking pretty hard. And like literally walking.
Oh no!
I like wanted to go to the medical tent so badly, and it was kind of one foot in front of the other to finish the race when I decided that's the course of action I really wanted to take. And so anyway, that by the time I was getting Gatorade in my mouth, it was too late. Yeah. But regardless, of having not the ideal race. I was still really happy with my fitness and, up to 20 miles, I had a great race. And I was still like really happy with the people we met and the atmosphere, and it was cool exposure to be out there.
Well, I really appreciate that. Also, that story, just because on this podcast, as a lot of the listeners know, that's what we talk about all the time is nutrition.
Yeah.
And so that's and it happens to everybody, right? Like we talk a lot about triathlon here because that's the sport that I'm in. And one of the things that happens all the time is people like lose their bottles off the back of their bike, or they don't get the amount of nutrition right. And then it leads to outcomes that are less than ideal. And it's just, it's such a big, we call it the fourth discipline in triathlon because it's the fourth thing that you really have to make sure you get right. Otherwise, especially for those longer races, like they turn into exactly what you talked about. It's that 20 miles where everything just breaks down and you just have to like walk your way practically to the finish line because your body doesn't have anything left. Yeah, so I'm sorry that happened, but I also know that is a part of this, like these sports. And it does happen to everybody and even the best of us.
Yeah, totally. Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Consolidation.
I feel for you on that. That would be it's so frustrating too, especially because also the people who listen to this podcast also know that I've had less than ideal races this year. And it's so frustrating when you feel like your training is at a point where, you don't get that result out of that race where you think or knew you were capable of. It's just such I feel for you.
Yeah. And that's so funny because like, regardless of nutrition, like I feel like that is the ideal of racing is that you want to show the work that you've put in.
Yes.
Right? Like you want to be able to show like, okay, this is where I was at. Mm-hmm. And like really know like where to work on your fitness, whether that was like more strength or more long distance, or aerobic training. So, I mean, like, I feel like it's relatable on any scale of, just like, not having an ideal race is just like not showing like where you're really at. And that's really the most frustrating part.
Oh, it's so frustrating. Okay. Anyway. Do you have any like highlights or stories across like being a woman in sports so far?
Oh, yes. Actually, so because this is a nutrition podcast, I was thinking about this where when I came to college. Well, so we'll start back in high school, actually. Okay. In high school, my high school coach politely asked me if I wanted to lose a little bit of weight because, he saw that all I ate was candy. And I was like, oh yeah, like you're right. Like I could totally eat better and lose a little bit of weight. And that was kind of, that was back in like before like 2010. And so I took that so seriously. And the nutrition understanding, like the common nutrition understanding from that point was like no fats and like lower your carb intake or whatever. And so I tried to be like so disciplined in the best way that I knew how. And that just ended up kind of causing it wasn't like an eating disorder, but basically like I was developing like an unhealthy relationship with food, right? Because of like what I was trying to accomplish. And so when I went to college, so I lost a little bit of weight in high school, like pure like discipline or whatever, which was really hard. And then like towards the end of my senior year, like I gained a bunch of weight back because I wasn't as disciplined because you can only be disciplined for so long. By the time I went up to college, I kind of had like nobody helping me. I was off on my own again. And I just like binge ate a ton, like anything like I wanted to eat, I would eat. I wouldn't listen to any of the signals in my body. And so I finally was like, okay, wait, I need to get help because like the coach kicked me off the team because like I wasn't performing well because, like I wasn't taking nutrition seriously and I wasn't sleeping well. I was out like dancing my heart away. And anyway, so then, I approached the weight coach at BYU, as in the strength and training coach, and was like, I need help. Like, can you help me lose weight? And I was kind of like, and I was like asking my coach, like, how to like go about this. Right. And I don't think anyone really knew or like understood how women work. Right.
Yeah.
I kept getting advice from, and I didn't realize it then, but it was just all from a male perspective, where it was just like, just listen to your body, and like, just like when you're full, stop eating, and just like kind of like have this natural standpoint, or like asking me to do, like extreme like new diet trends that they'd heard, like, oh, like, like maybe like this like intermittent fasting might like help you like as a runner, which was like one of the biggest no-nos. Like, yeah, it was just like so bad. And then, also a lot of people actually didn't want to help me because they were like, oh, like, we don't want you to like develop anorexia or like any like eating disorders. And so they just didn't want to even go there. They're just like, like just eat like a healthy, balanced diet. And so I was just so confused and frustrated because like my body was not responding to any of this advice. Right.
Yeah.
And so like as a woman in sports, it's been like really fun. Fun now looking back, because it's like, wow, I've learned so much, but not fun. And the fact that, there's been a lot of like, why is my body this way, and why doesn't my body respond in the way that like they say it should be responding, and learning just how hormones like affect you, and just in your diet, for example. If you're, eating a lot of like inflammatory foods during the high hormone phase of your cycle, that's going to like exacerbate the problem, like of your like of estrogen being too high. I'm trying to not speak like too scientifically, because that's not fun to follow. But you just I really started to learn how my body responds to food, and treating it more like still enjoying it, but also like resetting the signals in my body to like be able to listen to my body, because before like I wasn't able to listen to my body. Sorry, going back to that point of people being like, you just need to listen to your body and like, eat until you're full. I'm like, my body, if I listen to my body's telling me that like, I want a full Cafe Rio burrito, and then we're going to go get Yogurtland afterwards. And like, maybe I'll grab a cookie on the way home as well. Like, I like just didn't comprehend that. And so anyway, going through that process has been really cool to be able to like reset my body and actually be able to listen to my body, because I now like understand my hormones.
Yeah. I'm like so curious. So like, did you learn a lot of this just because you started diving into like books and like doing this on your own, that you've been sort of picking a lot of this stuff up? Or did you like learn from a coach or from somebody else like along the way after college? Yeah.
So after college, my husband and I, we would, he was like really into experimenting with diets. He thought it was just fun, like he's like, well, yeah. what would happen? And so I kind of went along for the ride a little bit with that, but I also was like researching a ton on the internet. I listened to like a ton of podcasts that were really helpful. And, I'm sure you've heard of Dr. Stacy Sims.
Yep. Oh, yes.
Yeah. Like, and she was just like an incredible directional scientist for women in long distance sports. And so that was super helpful. But I think mostly just like experimenting on my own body, and like, that really is like the biggest truth that you can find is like, oh, like this actually works because like my body is responding the way I want it to, instead of people claiming all these results. Right. So first we started with keto was kind of like this like new and upcoming thing. And my husband worked with this company that was really into keto. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, yeah, maybe I'll try that out, which was like a huge mistake.
Yeah.
Like at the moment. The like first couple of days, my head felt so clear. Like I was like, wow, this is so cool. Like I have this like really clean energy. But like outside of working out, like I felt fantastic. But working out, I felt absolutely terrible. My workouts were totally going downhill. And so I quickly nixed keto, and I was like, okay, I don't think that's for me, but like, I think I'll like stray towards keto-ish lifestyle with like carbs mixed in it. So just like basically like cutting down on like sugars, and we started eating like a lot of fake sugar stuff. And you know, like because he was still doing keto.
Sure.
And so then after that, you know, maybe this was like a year and a half later, and I still was like moderately successful in running, but not like anything special. And we moved to Australia, and we were like, we should try being vegan. Like that would be really fun. Like, let's try that out and see like how we feel with that. And so we did the vegan lifestyle, and we were both like amazed because like pretty quickly our workouts started going very well. Like we're like, wait, like, well, yeah. And we were very good about getting like about prepping meals and like really trying to get like a ton of variety and getting our protein, because we had all this time. All right. We were in Australia by ourselves. We still hadn't really met anyone. We had like our own controlled environment. And so after, and then while I was vegan, that's actually when I got pregnant, which was awesome. And we felt like that helped, just because of like stuff we'd read about, like how being vegan had like helped other people get pregnant. And so we thought maybe that was a thing, but I'm not saying like that is a, if you're having a hard time getting pregnant, that's not like the cure all. But that happened to help me at the time. And so then, with workouts going really well, my husband started to see that his workouts actually started to taper off. I think that was after 3 or 4 months. Yeah. And so we decided after that we're like, okay, I think maybe like cycling being vegan is like a really good idea. And, you know, and just because I mean, I'm sure there's like a ton of science to it, but our theory being that like, it's just hard to be able to like prep being vegan all the time. And like, you're going to miss out on nutrients. And eventually like your power is going to diminish. And so anyway, so it is really good to like eat meat. And right now we're more on like the whole foods trend, and just like lower inflammation and just trying to get as many whole foods as possible. And then, you know, occasionally maybe, you know, 1 or 2 days a week being vegan, we think is helpful, just like all about lower inflammation. Yeah. So anyway, that's kind of been like,
I love it. I'm going to nerd out for just a second on a bunch of things that you said, because you hit on so many amazing points that I think I see come across as areas where people are so confused in nutrition, which you similarly were. I mean, when you're told like to eat what you think you want or need, like how you feel, and when that is literally like ice cream, that's so confusing. Like it's so confusing. But what I learned when I started out, just in for my own health, I wasn't even in nutrition yet, is I started in CrossFit in college, and then that led into the paleo trend. And I didn't really realize what was happening at the time, but what ends up happening when you start exploring just the different diets, like in themselves, just as you've like organically figured out as well, is that you start resetting. So you get rid of a bunch of the stuff which you talked about as far as like inflammatory foods. And then that opens up your body to be able to communicate with you a little bit better, which is why I loved the reason why we got connected was because you put this post up on social media about centering more on like the do's versus the don'ts and about listening to your body. And I don't see that very often come across from people, especially in the just in this athletic world. And so that's what really kind of, I was like, oh, I really want to learn more about what her experience has been, just because you just don't see that very often. But it does take some time to get stuff to reset. And part of the reason for that, and we'll get a little sciencey here, is because there's many different reasons for this, but there's like the bacteria in your gut. They do dictate quite a bit of what we want to consume. Yeah. So, if you have a bunch of bugs in your gut that just love sugar, you're going to crave sugar, and you're going to crave, right? You're going to crave those fats and the types of foods that you typically feed it. But the benefit of like keto and vegan and going vegan and trying these different kind of diets, and then we'll talk about like bringing in meat after that, is that what ends up happening is you bring a lot more fiber into your GI tract, and then that influences the diversity of those different types of bacteria in your gut, which then also leads to healthier hormones and just a healthier body in general. But then I think it's really interesting that you've sort of figured out as far as from like the keto side, if somebody's not familiar with keto, it's basically really low carb. So like 25 grams or less of carbohydrates, and then really, really, really high fat. So 100 grams plus of fat per day, and then a good amount of protein. And it does make you feel really good outside of sports. It's a very like clean feeling, as you mentioned. It feels like all that brain fog just like goes away, and you've got this like clean energy. But where that transitions into sport is just, it's not good, because you need those carbohydrates to fuel off of, especially in endurance sports. So I think it's really interesting then that you transitioned into trying out going vegan, which also in and of itself is super interesting, because you cut out dairy products, which can be highly inflammatory to some people. Although, did you still eat gluten? Because a lot of the times vegans tend to eat a lot more of like gluten type products, just because it helps to fill that void a little bit. I'm just curious.
Yeah, we did still eat gluten, but it was definitely lessened, which was interesting because, because I relied a lot more on like rice and potatoes.
Okay. Yeah, that's
also another discussion.
Well, but that's actually really interesting though, because a lot of the times I'll say like, because I go in and out of going gluten-free for different reasons. But whenever I say that, people ask me like, well, what do you eat?
Yeah.
Well, rice, potatoes, sweet potatoes, like those kind of, right? There's actually quite a bit. Beets are really high in carbohydrates. I mean, just your starchy carbs are really where those come from. Did you notice any difference though so your husband noticed that he was starting to kind of lose a little bit of power when it came to not eating meat, but did you notice any difference when you brought meat back in?
Yes, I really did think that I had more power like when I brought meat back in. But it was like dairy. Yeah. When I brought dairy back in, I felt terrible. Like I was like, okay, for sure. Like I am someone who there's like a lot of inflammation with dairy, which, I honestly don't think everybody experiences like the same amount of inflammation from dairy. Totally. But for sure I am one of those people. I feel so much better when I'm not like consuming a ton of dairy. But with meat, I found that, like too much also made me feel like a bit too heavy. But that like when I did initially add it back in, I was just adding fish. And so I did feel good. Because it was like just a bit lighter. But then when I was adding back in like steak and chicken, that's when I was like, well, like, this does not feel like super great, even though like I had a little more power the couple days after,
Interesting.
Yeah. And so I do think there was like something to like within like the 24 hours. So like now within 24 hours of like a race, I try to veer towards either eating like a light meat, like fish, or being vegan, because like something about the blood flow just makes it feel easier to compete in like aerobic centered activities. But I do think like, there's so much bioavailability in meat, meaning like I mean, you know what this means, but to our listeners, like you can consume like the nutrients that are in the meat, like your body accepts them a lot very well, accepts them very well.
Yes.
And so I do think like meat is great. It's also like a great source, but there can be a downside of like too much.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's definitely a balance that, there's so much to learn as far as what we can get from plants, but also what we can get from meat, and balancing those two takes, I think, kind of what you recognized, which is that especially when you go to the extremes, right, of like going to be like vegan for a period of time, you actually have to learn how to eat plants. You have to learn how, you don't necessarily, you can go the whole processed food route, but the best way to go is to really learn how to create more of those different types of, plant-based bowls that really are all very, very nutrient dense and have a lot of colors. And then when you mix meat back in, then it's not dominating the majority of your plate, which I think is a thing that is really good for a lot of people to learn. Although usually what I'll say too is like, if you have an issue with meat, or if you are trying to learn some of these things, what I'll usually say is try to buy, some of the more expensive, like very well raised, like go to your local farmers, and try and get, your chicken that's raised, like actually pasture raised chicken, and your, actually grass fed, grass finished beef, and try and incorporate those in maybe a few times a week. So it's not going to like burst your budget by any means, but it will be better quality meat. And then you don't necessarily have to eat that all week long. So it's not, just a money intensive thing, but if you can't, right. Some people can, but if you can't, and then try and focus more on plants throughout the rest of the week. And that's usually a pretty solid approach for a lot of people.
Yeah. And like I wanted to mention before, like what you were just saying, it does take effort. It takes a lot more effort to go vegan. And if you're going to do it right, and like, it's worth it if you do it right. It's like, you don't have time to do it right. Or you're not going to make time to do it right. Like just, like make sure you're getting in like the nutrition you need, I guess is what I'm saying. Find a different time to experiment with it, but yeah.
Absolutely. Okay. So we have a little bit more. I have a couple more questions for you. And we're just going to take a short break, and we'll be right back after this. Okay. So Mckenna, I'm curious, when is your off season, and how does that fall over the holiday season, or how do you spend your holidays?
Yeah. So things have changed very like dramatically, from like before I got pregnant to now, postpartum. And, before I got pregnant, I feel like I really didn't have an off season, especially like post college. It was just like, there was just race after race after race. And like, you have road racing, and then cross country, and then track, indoor track and outdoor track. And I just felt like I really wasn't taking a break, which, probably was part of the reason I wasn't doing very well. And so, postpartum, I actually like took a break, and was able to like, again, reset and like start new. And I had a like really successful season off of that. And so now I'm taking a break currently, post marathon, during the holidays, and, just kind of like, again, resetting myself. The holidays, before, like I would train kind of hard through the holidays, and, I would still like enjoy a treat or two. But then there's also times where, I was like, no, I'm like not doing any treats. And I feel like I've found kind of like a balance now where, I've been able to like enjoy, and also like stick to the same like routine of like less inflammatory, foods, like, like an 80-20 rule for the holidays. Yes. Yeah.
Do you feel like that's super restrictive, or do you feel like that just really aligns with something that just feels good for you?
Yeah, I think that aligns with something that feels good for me because I just like connecting with people. And I responded to someone's comment on the post that we had mentioned earlier, the nutrition post I posted. They were asking about, like desserts. And for me, like, it's not the dessert that I'm like sad about missing out on. It's like the connection with people where, if you're not eating the dessert, like you're not experiencing this like connection and like happiness with like the people around you, or it seemed like it seemed that way, like it was harder. Because I think food brings like a lot of connection with like your family and friends. Like if you think about it, we eat a ton with like socially. And so finding a replacement helped that feel like not restrictive. So for example, like bringing my own dark chocolate and strawberries, like, because I knew, like, okay, maybe I don't want to be eating like this not quality ice cream and cake, like at this party. Because that's another kind of rule of thumb I've always lived by is if it's not like something I totally want, like I don't want to waste my calories and time on it and feel bad about myself after. And so yeah, like kind of finding a replacement, I think has helped that feel like not restrictive. If I am choosing to, opt out of the dessert that is there. And then if I am choosing to opt in, I try to make sure that I am like really connecting with like the people around me and not like just focused on the food, because like I mentioned before, like I have been in that phase of like just focused on like, this is the last time I'll ever be eating this kind of feeling of food. And that's not healthy either,
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think I found like a good balance now.
Yeah. I think you've and over the course of this episode, you've definitely covered a lot of the swings that people go through in nutrition. Yeah. It's the extreme on either side.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So do you have anything coming up in 2022? What races, what things are coming up next year? What's your plans?
Yeah. So I think that I'm going to try and dive into a little more track again, just to kind of, keep that fire alive. And track also just helps you stay in shape for road races. And I'm going to try and do the 10K track champs, which is in May, which I think would be a really fun venture to, try and be in the low 31 minutes for the 10K. And that would be really fun to do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Awesome. So, okay, I have a couple more questions before we wrap up here. What has it been like getting back into training after having a kiddo?
Oh, it's difficult.
Okay.
Like in the sense, well, so looking back, I feel like it didn't feel, there were a lot of times where it didn't feel difficult, right? But that was because like we were very intentional about like the purpose and like setup. And so now realizing that it's like, wow, like being a mom, like you really do have to push for your time and for me, it was to exercise and to run, and you have to push for that time because like you can't just before, when I didn't have a baby, like I got to have that time whenever I wanted, and I didn't have to talk to anyone about that time. But now, like, I have to communicate that time. Like, hey, can you help watch my kid? Or like, hey, Mike, who's my husband, like, when are your meetings? Because, like I need to go, when's going to be like a good time for me to go run? So you can like watch her while she's sleeping or, yeah. And so that is difficult, but I do feel like if you are intentional and you put forth the effort, like you can make it happen. Sure. And once that plan is in place and that rhythm's in place, like you just have to get the rhythm going.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then it's not so hard.
Setting those habits and routines. They always change.
I know. And that really has been like the hard part is like, now she's changing, she's moving to like one nap. And I'm like, oh man, like I still have doubles.
Sure.
So who knows? I think I'll maybe be waking up early to go out and run and before she wakes up. So
yeah, we'll constant flexibility, huh?
Totally.
You get a routine for a couple of months and then it starts to change again.
Yeah. Just fun. Man. Always a new challenge. A lot of adaptation.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, it also sounds like you've learned a little bit too, that rest is a good thing as a part of your plan too.
Yes. Oh, totally. So I've actually this last, like post New York Marathon, I took 2 weeks, like just totally, completely off. And then I started cross training because my Achilles was hurting, but I really like have faith that is going to be so beneficial for my season. Like even the cross training, I think is like kind of a blessing that helps you like not go too hard. And it helps you know, like do something, which I think it's important to do something, but like to not overdo it. I think people overtrain way too easily. And so I'm excited to build off of this like full month of basically rest that I've had from running and see what happens.
Oh, I love it. I can't wait to see how next year goes and to see how all, you know, these learning lessons play out. And, you know, it's my favorite part of sport is you just learn as you go, you know, you just take the year and you see what went well and what didn't and what you can experiment with and hack and, you know, try something different and see what that outcome is. It's always something, there's always something to learn and there's always something different to try. And it's fun.
Yeah. I love that approach. I think that's great. That's a good philosophy to live by. I think we feel, sorry, just to add this.
Oh, you're good.
There's like a little bit of like chasing happiness all the time when like really we need to chase like more meaning and fulfillment and like to what you just said, like growth is not like happiness. Like it gets really uncomfortable and like it's hard to learn like if you're learning something, it's probably not very comfortable. But like afterwards, once you like learn, it's so fulfilling and like so meaningful. And like, hopefully you are growing from that and not really like, there's just so much more satisfaction to me in that, in chasing that.
I don't think we could have any better of a way to end this year with that right there. Like this, you don't know a whole lot about my story, but my listeners do, and they know that I've had quite a year with a lot of my races. So dealing with heat and a lot of learning lessons, and it has absolutely pushed me to learn what to really enjoy the process and the journey that it is and not put as much weight in the outcome of the races. And I'm certainly very proud of the whole season and what I was able to accomplish in the really just not great conditions that were surrounding that. But that's such a good way to end this season, this year of this podcast as we move into next year. It's all about the learning. It's always about the journey. And it's there's so much more of that journey to come. And man, I can't wait to see what is coming for next year for both of us. So Mckenna, thank you so much for being here. It was a pleasure having you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I really, really enjoyed talking to you.
Awesome. Well, we might have to have you back depending on how next year goes. So that's our episode for now. Thank you so much for listening. Make sure to follow Wisp Sports on all social media channels and make sure to share this episode with anyone you think may love it. Mckenna, where can people find you if they'd like to follow along?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram as Ben's McKenz. And then my husband is on TikTok. He usually posts a lot of the journey. And it's Michael Myler.
Love it. Love it. I will make sure to follow him over there too. This episode or anything that you'd like to see come up on the show, you can at info@wispsports.com. And you can always leave a direct message with us over on social media as well. Thank you so much for listening. And I will be back in January of 2022 with the next season of episodes. Take care.